It wasn't a hypersonic missile. It wasn't a naval blockade in the Taiwan Strait. It wasn't even a diplomatic summit. It was a change in the settlement layer. For 80 years, the global financial system has operated on a single operating system, the US dollar. Every barrel of oil, every ton of copper, every microchip, priced in dollars, settled in dollars, cleared through banks that ultimately report to New York. This dominance grants the United States an exorbitant privilege. It allows Washington to sanction adversaries with a keystroke, to cut nations out of the global financial nervous system, to freeze reserves held in Western institutions. But power creates resistance, and absolute power creates absolute incentives to escape. The incentive is survival. If your national reserves can be frozen, they are not yours. If your energy trades can be blocked, you are not sovereign. Under these constraints, the rational move is to build a parallel system, a system immune to American law, a system that does not root through the correspondent banks of the West. Enter the e-CNY, the digital yuan. This is not a cryptocurrency. It is not a decentralized asset like Bitcoin. It is a central bank digital currency, a programmable liability of the state. It offers immediate settlement. It bypasses the SWIFT messaging network entirely. It allows nations to trade directly, wallet to wallet, without a single dollar changing hands. The arithmetic is merciless. As the utility of the dollar is weaponized, the utility of alternatives rises. History provides the precedent for how quickly these regimes can shift when the incentives align against the incumbent. In 1931, the British Empire faced a run on the pound. The constraint was the gold standard. The United Kingdom was forced to suspend convertibility on September 21st. Overnight, the bedrock of global trade fractured. The sterling bloc disintegrated, and the world moved toward a new center of gravity. In 1971, the United States faced a similar constraint. Too many dollars abroad, too little gold at home. President Nixon closed the gold window on August 15th. It was a unilateral restructuring of the global contract, a default in all but name. In 2022, the G7 froze the assets of the Russian central bank. This was the signal, the confirmation that the dollar is a political tool, not a neutral reserve. Current data suggests that central banks globally are now buying gold at the fastest pace since 1967. They are preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer the only option. The mechanics of this transition are not theoretical. They are operational. The digital yuan allows for programmable money, where the issuer can dictate exactly how, when, and where the currency is spent. But its geopolitical power lies in the bridge. Project a cross-border payment platform developed by the Bank for International Settlements and central banks including China, Thailand, and the UAE. This infrastructure allows digital currencies to be exchanged directly. It removes the need for dollar liquidity in intra-Asian trade. It removes the visibility of U.S. regulators. We can view the potential fallout in three distinct risk bands. In the low-risk band, the digital yuan simply facilitates regional trade. Within the regional comprehensive economic partnership, it becomes a nuisance to the dollar, eroding its market share in Southeast Asia, but not its hegemony. In the medium-risk band, we see the rise of the petro-yuan. If major energy exporters like Saudi Arabia begin accepting digital yuan for oil, the demand for dollars drops structurally. This would force a repricing of U.S. debt. As the automatic recycling of petrodollars into U.S. treasuries ceases, in the high-risk band, the digital yuan becomes the settlement rail. For a BRICS-based currency basket, this would create a bifurcated global economy, a dollar zone for the West and a commodities-backed zone for the East. In this scenario, the dollar's value would face severe downward pressure as trillions of dollars held overseas flood back into the domestic U.S. economy. There's a common counter-argument to this thesis. Many economists argue that China cannot replace the dollar because it lacks open capital markets and the rule of law. They contend that no one wants to hold a currency controlled by an authoritarian state with strict capital controls. Here is the rebuttal. You do not need to trust Beijing to use their payment rail. You only need to distrust Washington's sanctions more. The incentive is not to hold the yuan as a store of value for 50 years. The The incentive is to settle trade today without political interference. A transactional currency does not require the same trust as a reserve currency. Furthermore, technology bridges the trust gap. Smart contracts can ensure payment upon delivery, reducing the counterparty risk that previously required a trusted third-party bank. The endgames for the dollar's dominance follow a historical trajectory that rarely deviates. The first potential endgame is controlled decline. This is the scenario of a multipolar world, similar to the interwar period of the 1920s, where the dollar, the euro, and the yuan share the stage. The standard of living in the U.S. would slowly compress as the privilege of cheap imports fades. The second endgame is chaotic collapse. If the exit from the dollar happens to rapidly a run on the bank at a geopolitical scale, inflation in the U.S. would spike violently. We saw a microcosm of this in the UK during the 1956 Suez Crisis, where a loss of geopolitical standing led to an immediate run on the currency, forcing a humiliating retreat. The third endgame is reset and restructure. This would involve a new global gathering, a modern Bretton Woods, to design a neutral reserve asset that no single nation controls. This happened in 1944, and it happened in the Smithsonian Agreement of 1971. When the pain of the current system exceeds the cost of transition, the system is reset. The only variable is timing and pain. Subscribe and focus your education on the history of reserve currencies.